that you will have a chance to buy books and other stuff and get Maggie to sign. She's not going to leave until all the books are signed afterwards. So, but please take a seat now. I'd like to welcome you all to St. Paul's. And I'd like to welcome Maggie. This is not her first time here. We had her here a number of years ago. And I think she's desperately trying to sign the last book before the event. Well, I wasn't expecting everyone to quiet down so quickly. So anyway, let me tell you about St. Paul's. We are a loving community here. All are welcome. We're very happy to have you here, and very happy to start having events after COVID. We only just released our mandatory mask wearing a couple of weeks ago, so it's an exciting time here. But I'm losing material. I have material here. Oh, okay. In case you haven't already seen, the coffee's back there, and if you have too much coffee, the bathrooms are through the door. We do have an elevator which is accessible through this floor that goes to the sanctuary level and also down to the parking level. So if the stairs are too much, it's right through the doors here and on the left. And okay, let's get the show on the road here, shall we? There we go. Thanks, everyone.
I'm going up on the stage. Yeah, let's go sit.
Okay, hi everybody. So good morning, thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Mason, and I'm so pleased to be introducing Maggie today. I know you all know her, but I'm going to do an official introduction. So Maggie is the co-founder of the Blink Now Foundation and Coppola Valley Children's Home and School in Surkhet, Nepal. At age 19, she used her babysitting money and worked with the local community to build a home for orphan children in war-torn Nepal. So I met Maggie in 2014 through my friend Connie Leininger. And when she came here and spoke to the community about her school, right in this room. And a lot has happened since then, not even counting a pandemic. She got married, she grew her family, she opened a new school, won CNN Hero of the Year, and she wrote a book all about it. So Connie and Maggie will be discussing her new book, Between the Mountain and the Sky. Hold up. There we go. And there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. There's books for sale again at the end, information about Blink Now, and merchandise from the Women's Center. And so we're going to start.
Is this on? Yeah. So I want to thank everyone for coming. Also want to thank St. Paul's for giving us the space and venue. And the book comes out Tuesday, right? I pre-ordered it on Amazon, but anyone's here can go ahead and read it. And Amy and I had the chance to read it over the weekend. It's fabulous. It's a page turner. And we thought we'd kind of ask some questions, but not give away all the storylines. So do you want to do your list? Or you want me to do one? Okay. So we talked a little bit before, but Maggie, it was fabulous. And one of the things that really struck me is early on, when you get back home to Mendham, and there's a news article talking about this Nepalese orphanage, you got this kind of a cringy feeling because you didn't want the perception that it was an orphanage, but it's a family. This wasn't a stopover, but it's a permanent family. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that was one of the first scenes in the book that anchors us back to this community. And it was really actually challenging to write about a place that you're from because oh, it's just like you make these assumptions. And when I was working with the team, they were like, you have to really paint that picture of Mendham, of the garage sale, of what it's like. Because even someone reading in America who's in, say, Mississippi or Texas doesn't know what suburban New Jersey's like. So we really tried to paint the flags and, you know, the main street and give you that feeling that you feel. And that was the garage sale scene. And at this point in my life and the journey, I also didn't really have plans to go create a nonprofit. I just came back to like babysit. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna put some kids in school and try to make an impact on that riverbed. And I came back and I started babysitting and plant sitting and dog sitting and just working to send money back. And at that garage sale was a huge, like, kind of change in the story where the Observer Tribune picks it up and they write, you know, girls planning to build this orphanage. But yeah, the home was actually created because I hated orphanages. Like, it's so ironic. But I'd been traveling all throughout India, throughout Nepal, and orphanages in our world and our foster care system even is a very broken, broken place. And they're dark and they're dismal and you get your food slopped on a plate and, you know, they can be really high-risk places for children. So in the initial stages of the plan, when Tope, my co-founder, and I were trying to create this model of how we could make things different, we set out with the intention of a home and a family and meals around the table and bright yellow walls and kites in the sky and music playing. And in the end, it can kind of really relate my childhood experience to here because our childhood experience here is full of joy and comfort and love and home and dinners, and you can kind of see a piece of the childhood and the safety net and the privilege that I had kind of making its way back to Nepal. Yeah.
I'll go first. So there's another quote that really touched me in the book, and you say, you do your best to discriminate between the poor, the desperate, the hungry, who you can help and who is beyond help. The probability that you get it wrong is a ghost that you expect to haunt you forever. And then you talk a bit about, you know, investigating the background. Is there a family member? You know, who is it that, you know, a family's just hoping to get a better opportunity for their child versus someone who really has no safety net, no connection, no next. So that to me was something that struck me the first time you came to speak, and you know, reading it in the book really helped me understand like what you were facing, and maybe you could share a little bit about how you did that kind of, you know, culling through and trying to find the children that didn't have a safety net.
Good question. I think I stumbled a lot, and I didn't, now I speak Nepali, but at the time I didn't. And I was relying on translators and relying on being this outsider and trying to be so culturally sensitive and really fit in. And there was this struggle between, you know, what I knew but also trying to fit in and learn and just figure it out. And my two of my kids who are now in college, I've got Krishna at Notre Dame and Nisha is at Whitman in Washington. And we actually just had this conversation. I got to hand them the book, which is all I wanted to do. When we wrote this book, and I wrote it, I was just like, I'm doing it for the kids, don't think about anything else. So this past week, I actually handed them the book, and Krishna sat down and he read the whole thing in one night. And came the next day, highlighted quotes, you know, just wanted to talk about it. And the first thing he said was, why did you pick me? And it was like, oh my God, you're right. That was the first conversation that we had was, how did you know to pick me? And I was like, Krishna, first of all, I got really lucky picking you. But I think anyone I would have picked, I would have loved, because that's the gift of a child. They're all wonderful, and they're all, if given opportunity and love and a fun, amazing childhood, every child is yours, you know? And then Nisha read the book, and Nisha was like, made it through chapter 2, and she's like, I can't do anymore. This is too much. And we walked into the living room, she was bawling, crying. She was like, this is too much. and said the same thing. Her first question was like, I just can't imagine my life without this. And it's so hard to read it and look at my life on paper. But I didn't always know what I was doing. And there were so many failures. And still to this day, when we go through the admissions process, I'm like, am I getting this right or am I getting it wrong? And the only thing that's helped is building process and system and strategy and an admissions committee and the local people. I think the secret sauce in all of this, and you really see that in the book, is that you can't go in as an outsider expecting to have all the answers and all of the solutions. And making another little Mendham in rural Nepal wouldn't have worked. It was kind of finding this push and this pull and this struggle and relying on the expertise that we had. And the expertise that we had was the local people. And they knew. So now it's home visits and government, and a government that was just being established. But it was the hardest thing in those early days.
No, it's amazing. And it touched me that, you know, the concept of colonialism. A lot of people, you know, go overseas, do a mission trip or something, and there's not the sensitivity to the local culture. And when you initially start talking about creating the school and what you thought, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be the teacher for all these kids, and just how, you know, the school system was quite, they believed in corporal punishment, and it was very kind of harsh on the children and made a difficult learning environment. And then, you know, just as you described, like doing the home visits. So, you know, when you were developing the school and you were trying to create kind of an overall healthy learning environment, and how did you balance kind of like bringing in U.S. business classes and kind of the sensitivity of the agriculture? You talk about, you know, the cutting up potatoes and putting it in the ground, and you're like, what are you doing? So there were a lot of like funny points that struck me. So, you know, kind of, and the curriculum and developing the school, could you talk about how you sorted through that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of those moments of like these like feeling straddled between these two worlds, and the humor in it. Like my team and the people I raised the kids with, I bought a goat once, and they were like, you bought a grandmother. Like, you just got cheated so bad. That's an old goat. She's an old lady. She's never going to have kids. That was the worst investment ever. But there was like this teasing that went on. Like, I'd be chopping onions, and I chopped one onion in the time the aunties chop 100. So we kind of, like, I guess I was embraced as kind of like a little sister, and my unknowing kind of transformed into a lot of learning moments. But that being said, I was also a fighter, and I was like, this is wrong. Like, it's wrong that girls are not enrolled into school because of what I was given, because I'd seen this outside world and experienced this level of privilege. So in Nepal, there's still corporal punishment in the classroom. And imagine here, I'm coming from here, imagine like a stick in Chatham High, and just kids getting like lashed at and slapped across the face and hit against the head. And so I walk into that learning environment and I'm just like, what is going on? But at the same time, it's the culture. And that's when you engage in these conversations. Oh, well, it's the culture. And you're like, oh, like, is that the culture? Or is it just we need to kind of push ahead? Like, another really good example of that is chowpatty, which is in Nepal, when girls and women are menstruating, they have to sleep in a shed. And I slept in a shed when I was menstruating up in the village. And then it kind of like built this fire in me. I'm like, no, this is not right. This is wrong. I'm not cursed. I'm not tainted because I'm menstruating. But you couldn't just go and fight it head on because it's the culture. And so how do I, as an outsider, kind of integrate my own belief systems or knowledge, because knowledge is also helpful in education. And in the end, it did come down to education, which I believe is the world's greatest equalizer. But I didn't know, and I had to read a lot. It's so ironic that I have a book now, because in the beginning stages, it was just reading and reading and reading, and like, I had this also burning of like, how have we failed after all these years? Like, why am I seeing children breaking rocks on a riverbed when, 8,000 miles away, everyone has their basic needs met? So it was kind of just building that knowledge, not taking ourselves too seriously, and learning as we went along.
That leads me to a question I had about a chapter in the book. So I've been following your story for a while, since 2014, and I've never really heard some of the bad side of the stories. And there's a chapter in this book, and I'm going to butcher it. It's Boxy.
Yeah.
So that chapter in the book, you talk about that, and it was amazing to read how that was resolved, and what you did. I don't know if you want to share any of that with everyone.
Yeah, so I thought that was one of the biggest reveals of the book, because
Really, really was.
so we work in the nonprofit industry, and a lot of times in the nonprofit industry, you want to tell all the good, shiny things, because you want to take people's money and you want to show them that they can make an impact and they can make change and everything matters and this works. And so there's also this flip side where it doesn't really allow you to make mistakes and fail and be transparent, because you're using people's, hard-earned charity dollars. And so I always kind of, when I get up and speak in 25 minutes, I tell all the glory things, like, this happened, and because of you, this child is now in school and they're going to college. But often the darker side, or the mistakes or the mishaps, they get left behind, right? You don't always tell them. And so that was another motivating part of writing the story, is like, it wasn't always shiny and glossy, and you'd get a blip in the newspaper, do DIY foreign aid, and I always felt like there were just pieces left behind, and Boxy is that chapter for me. And basically, like, we get court cases all the time. We get really high-profile cases of sexual assault, of early marriage, of child trafficking, and we have to deal with these cases. And a lot of times it's the people in power or politics who are deciding the implications of a court case. So, for example, I've had cases where a young girl, as part of the punishment, is being forced to marry the perpetrator or the rapist. And then we have to go to court, put that child in a safe house while the whole community is coming after them, and try to, talk about how to protect her when the whole community is trying to protect the perpetrator. So in the chapter of Boxy, I basically tried to intervene on a child marriage. A little girl who I cared deeply about and had watched grow up. I mean, she was the ping pong champion. She was the one at the center of the stage. She was the one winning poetry and debate competitions. And one day she just didn't show up to school, and she'd been married. And I knew she was 15. And we basically go and we try to intervene. And in the scene and in the book and in real life, the community is not having it. And there's stones that are thrown, and probably like one of the most dangerous places I've ever been, and everyone was really angry, and I got into a mob situation where I was trying to get the girl out of this situation, and they were saying, no, this is our culture, you're interfering. And ultimately the police came, and as in a lot of these cases, we lost the case, and the girl was gone. And that has happened way more times than I can count. And we've had to learn how to navigate these things. And again, like, I was going in with the fight, go, get her out, this is wrong. And I think what I've learned, and as you learn through the book, it was the community that had to fight that fight. The community itself had to decide child pity is wrong for our daughters. The community and the families themselves have to choose early marriage is wrong, our daughters are worth more than that. But I think in the beginning, as a 20-something-year-old, I was just like, this is wrong, and I'm going to use my stance and my power in the community to fight it. And throughout the narrative of the book, you're like, ooh, there's another way to go about this. That's when the Women's Center is born, and the school, and family development, and all the social workers we've hired. And
It was almost like the book changed a little bit after that section where you regrouped and said, this is what we're going to have to do. Teach by example.
Yeah, and we lost case after case, and it's like, no, we gotta do something different here. We've got to go from a different angle. Kind of working in policy around child play was eventually made illegal. So hopefully, and actually corporal punishment was made illegal. And we had multiple schools, sign an anti-corporal punishment policy. So it was kind of working at the top as well and changing the narrative at the top while also empowering and bringing up a new generation who could see and know things differently. But yeah, that was a hard one. And I kind of like a lot of those things, grief and loss and your failures, you kind of just bury them away. It's just like, I think that's my nature too. I'm like, just keep going, and writing it, I had to go back and like look at, I really sucked there. And at one point I had to tell my editor, I was like, I was not perfect. Like, we need to go back and like, I did a lot of bad things in here. Like, let's go. This is where I failed. And so it was kind of nice to be able to look at those parts of myself too.
That was one of my other questions, was what did you learn about yourself while writing the book? You obviously learned a lot.
Yeah, it was really cathartic. It felt like therapy. I talked a little bit about this in the sermon, but when I sat down to write the book, I had been in Nepal. It was during the pandemic, and some of you might have followed, but we had millions of migrant people trying to get from India to back home to Nepal, and there was a food crisis, and daily wage laborers and migrants hadn't worked, and it was just really, really intense and very drastic. And after 6 months or so, I evacuated Nepal, and I got reunited with my husband and our biological daughter, Ruby, and then this happened. And I was in this little cabin living with my mother and father-in-law on a Canadian evacuation flight. I had to isolate for 14 days during quarantine. And it was kind of just a time to like sit with myself and just be and think. And then the opportunity to write the book came along, and I was like, if I don't do this now, like face all of my inner demons and my grief and my loss, and just take this time to reflect and be quiet, because in a way that's what the pandemic was. Like, we just all got sent to our rooms and sent to be alone. And it was just this conversation with myself of like, no, it's time. And if I can't do this on an island, off of an island in Canada, all alone, like, it'll never get done. So that was how it started.
That leads me to another question, that the book is beautifully written, first of all, and the nature in the book is stunning. Like, I felt like I could see the mountains, and I could see the valley, and I could see the riverbed. I really felt like I was there. And I was wondering, how much did nature figure into your daily life before your trip to Nepal? Were you always in nature? Because a lot of us went into nature during the pandemic. We spent a lot of time outside, we still are. Was it always, inspiring for you, or something?
It's always been my place. And that was my parents. I would say, like, what did my parents do well? That was their one thing. They always took us into nature. So I was fishing when I was little. Every 2 weeks of every summer, we'd pack up the minivan and go swim in a lake, or just go find a trail or find a waterfall to climb. And because I was brought up that way, riding bikes and swimming, and look at where we live. I mean, I grew up right on Patriots Path. That was my backyard, a little stream and a bridge. And because of that, I think I've always found peace and solace and comfort. And still, to this day, I run very anxious and very, I'm a very nervous person. And all I need to do is walk outside and find a tree, or find fresh air, or find nature. And it's such a healing force in my life. And then I also wanted to integrate that. Talk about bringing what you had in your childhood, the good things, into your own children. I wanted them to have that, because it had been such a comfort for me. And yeah, I think, again, I had to think about, okay, someone who's never been to Midwestern Nepal, and it's not their reality, how do I do that? And so it was really painting the mountain and the sky and the kites and the trees and the Himalayas. as kind of like an anchoring force in the book as well. Make people feel like they're there.
I definitely felt like I was there.
Oh, good. The chai, the smell of the chai, and
That was very descriptive. Very nice.
thank you.
I don't know if we have time for any more,
Or people.
Yeah.
or do we have questions? Oh, we have questions.
Oh, you can ask anything.
Okay, Leslie.
Thank you.
I have two dramatically different questions.
Okay.
One is, when you said, hey, Mom and Dad, I'm not going to college. Oh, by the way, I'm staying in Nepal. How did that go? And the other question is, how did you convince the Nepalese government that it was okay for a white woman from Mendham, New Jersey, to adopt their children?
Yeah. Okay, so should I take the first one first?
This is more important.
Your parents, how did they?
Oh, my parents. Okay.
Yeah.
So, my parents, my dad, and you'll read about them, but my dad was this very different, offbeat, high empathy, like, was the guy that took us out into the woods for our whole childhood, and he was not one of the, like, high pressure, you need to get into Notre Dame, like, you need to go to Wake Forest, Boston College, like, he just, that was not him at all. That was not, if you know him, he didn't care, he wasn't a who's who, he just was the proudest dad of 3 daughters, and so I wanted my dad to be the one to answer the phone and take that call, but he got my mom on the phone too, and my mom is tenacious, she's like a bull. She's strong. She was like, girls need to go to college. She's a feminist. She wanted me to get my education. And so there was this kind of push and pull. My mom did not want me to stay. And it took her a long time to come around. But ultimately, I'd grown up babysitting. I'd saved. I was the saver of all of my money from the time I was 5 doing lemonade stands. And so they sent it to me, and they wired that money over, and then we bought the land. As far as, and then there was a whole other thing that ensued for the years to come with my parents.
There's a whole timeline to that.
But they've come around, and the second question is, geopolitically, at the time that we were in Nepal, there was really no government structure at all. Like, Nepal had ended its civil war officially in 2004, 2005, the time that I was going to Nepal, but it took 10 years to write the Constitution, and there was no political infrastructure, leadership, or child rights. I mean, adoption was open in 2003, international adoption, and then they closed international adoption around 2003, 2004 because of child trafficking and the proximity to the Indian border. And so there were a lot of kind of gray lines, and I worked with the Women and Children's Welfare Office, and they also knew that they needed a placement facility for children. And at that time in Nepal, there just wasn't a lot of real childcare. There was no social system or infrastructure to support what was happening, and at the same time there was 1 million orphan children. So they were kind of just, it was a conversation that went on for multiple years, and we had the paperwork, and we also registered an NGO, and we were so rooted there, and I just kind of proved myself. I don't know. But I also had Baju and Tobe and some of the other characters in the book, and we were a full-force parenting team, and it worked itself out. But yeah, good question. Thank you.
Your story is very impressive. I'm just thinking about all you've done for the kids in Nepal, but at the same time, I wanted to know how your experience has changed you over the years. You went there when you were very, very young, right, 19.
Mm-hmm.
So on that respect, if you have to talk to a friend here that lives in northern New Jersey and explain what the main life lessons that you've had, that you wouldn't have had any other way if you hadn't gone there, what would you say to her or to them or to your friends here? what are the life lessons that you got living there?
Oh, good question. In the beginning, to be honest, I couldn't relate to friends my age at all, like college and Jell-O shots, and like I just couldn't, North American college culture, right? But then over the years, like my friends have all become, a lot of them have become mothers, and we are at this time with the rise of social media where you can see, I mean, everyone saw the image of a pregnant woman from Ukraine who died a few days ago. And what that's doing, I think, that we can see these atrocities, this pain, this suffering, this human loss of life. I wonder if it's making us more. We know the issues of the world now. We're looking at it every single day. We're feeling it, and I think what I would say, like what I've learned, is that just doing what we can where we can, and those of us. My message when I talk to kids is often like. People say, well, why was I born into this, right? And another child could be born into that. Like, why was I the pregnant mom that just had a healthy baby boy 4 months ago, and that pregnant mom is on a gurney and she didn't make it? Like, there's all these issues that we have to reconcile, especially when we live in a place like this where rockets aren't falling. You know, we're not women in Afghanistan right now. And it's a question I struggle with every day. Like, even walking into the church this morning, I was like, it's beautiful. It's the most beautiful day. The buds are on the trees. I love Chatham so much. This is such a special place to my heart. I've come here for healing. My greatest friends are here. Yeah, why was I given so much? Why was I born here when the rest of the world is like this? And I think the answer to that is we were given this safety and this privilege just because it was a lottery, and this is where we were born, and we have to give back. And we have to find step-by-steps to take what we have and give back to the rest of our human family. And we are a human family. All humans want the same thing. We want to raise our children with safety and nourishment and nutrition and love and a chance to go to school. That's what makes us human. We're a family, and I hope that the message and my message is that we use what we have and give back and anchor ourselves in love and kindness and and make sure that I want every child to have what Krishna had. When he said, well, why did you choose me? I was like, I don't know, but it's not, like, I want every child to have what the kids at Coppola had. I want every child to have the childhood that I had. It's not about like we have so much and we need to give back, and it's about just anchoring in gratitude and then seeing and staying awake and realizing, what do we have to give? How can we share this? How can we share what we have with the rest and make sure we get to a better place where rockets don't have to fall and there doesn't have to be war or orphans? Thank you for the question.
Any other questions? Lori?
You've done so much in the community that you're in Nepal, and I'm just wondering how far geographically your reach goes, and if you've seen your model replicated further away from where your base is, or in other countries, or...
Yeah, good question. Geographically, we're in the Karnali region. It's one of 7 provinces, and this is called, Karnali is the Midwest. So it's actually the area of Nepal where the Civil War started and the Maoist Revolution. It's extremely remote. It's one of the most food deficit regions of the world. And the last 15 years has been about learning, and I definitely feel like, hey, if we could figure this out in a place like Surkhet, Nepal, in the most remote region of the world, following a civil war, an earthquake, political instability, maybe this can work anywhere and everywhere. So one of our hopes and what we're working on is taking every single part of our program, and it's so integrated, you know, the Women's Center, the sustainable farming, the curriculum, all of the learnings and the programs that we've been able to put together for the whole child, and then take it out and share it And it's one of my favorite things that I do is talking to other nonprofit leaders and young people coming up through the ranks who want to do this work in their own communities. I mentor a girl in India and a girl in Malawi who wants to do something in her community, and it's been really fun to use the learnings and the platform to just be able to share, like, oh, this is what worked for us, and have you tried this? And I think that's what's also really exciting about development, is that we know what works now, right? We know that putting little girls into school and helping them stay in school changes the world. That every single outcome changes. And we know that empowering a mother is one of the greatest forces that we can give, one of the greatest tools, microloans. So it's been fun. I think we're at an exciting chapter. I do think we're going to have to take a few steps back after the pandemic, and we've got to backslide when it comes to girls and child marriage and hunger. But we're about to have the most educated generation of young girls and women that we've ever had on the history of the planet. And things are getting better because of the work and because of everybody's giving. And I believe in it so much and so deeply after seeing it. So I'm excited to share everything that we've learned and outsource and franchise or whatever it looks like. We're up for the challenge. It's going to be fun.
Anyone else? Okay.
I have one more. How do you move to the other side of grief to become productive and optimistic again?
There's the tissue.
I don't know. I think, like, for me, it was like, do I stay in bed forever and never get up? Like, that's a question we have every day. Like, this is so, we're in a bad, like, this is hard. Like, this is a hard time to be in. And it was kind of like, you have no option. Like, get up. I have other children to mother. I have, we still are here, and it's this fight, I think, that fighter in me that's like, we're not giving up here. This is not the end of your journey at all. There's a chapter in this book called One Brave Thing, and I don't know why, but I was in Chatham when that chapter was happening. I was living right here, and I made a challenge for myself to do one brave thing every day. And it was like, okay, what's your brave thing today? And one day I did a yoga class right here. What's the hot yoga place called? Power Flow. And then another day I went and bought peanut butter at Whole Foods. And then another day I went to CVS and got toothpaste or something. But it started that small. My journey with grief, even seeing someone would be so hard. And then I built myself up. So I think in challenging moments, it's like, okay, have your moment to grieve and loss and just sit in the suckiness of it and the horror of it. And it kind of is like anything in life. Sit with it, but then you got to get back up and get back up again and go at it again and do it again and start small. And then the last big step of one brave thing is getting back on the plane and going back home to Nepal and seeing and hugging the kids. And at the beginning, I didn't think I could ever do that. I felt like such a failure. So, One Brave Thing is one of my favorite chapters. It's why I'm so happy to be here today, because I was in Chatham for so much of that. I was walking the streets, and Hans and Ruth Decker live right here. I'd walk there every day, and one brave thing would be to sit and have dinner with their girls and put on a smile. So it's so nice to be back here. And it's so full circle. It's a really great homey place to start talking about it. And today this was my brave thing, because I was so scared to get up. And you should have seen me. I was in the pulpit. And the first time I got up on the stairs, I knocked the book down on the ground. I'd get down from the pulpit, go pick the book up. I was so scared. I was so nervous. And the books are like, getting out into the world on Tuesday. So the one brave thing kind of came all the way back.
You're doing very, very well for your first in-person.
I know. We've got our book partner here, and thank you so much. And I'm signing. It's a great book club book. I also really recommend it for young people. Like, I really wrote it for middle schoolers and YA and just this next generation who are struggling with, like, what do I do? What's my purpose? How do I give back? Where do I go? We're just being handed so much to process as young people going through all of this. So I wrote it for young people, and I hope that it resonates. I got my cry out of the way.
I was like, we made it all the way through before a big cry.
I know.
It's real. It's real.
I also just had a baby, so postpartum.
So I
have one question.
Okay.
Sorry, it spurred, a question was, you're from here, and you visit there, and you know that you can almost come and go, right? At the will of the cost of the airplane, possibly. In other words, you have flexibility of leaving. What goes through your mind, or how do you process that? I spent a semester in China many years ago. And I was a sort of a naive student thinking, I'm an American, I can do whatever I want. Meaning, like, I have the power of my country or whatever. And now we see today, it's like, you're one individual, you're not necessarily protected by your country. So but you also know you have flexibility to come and go. At the time I was there, it's not like it was today. So it was very different times, and so which is what you experience. Mm-hmm. So every time you come and go, or knowing what, the other kids you leave behind, what goes through your mind, I guess?
Yeah, this book, I also had to navigate and really look deeply at my own privilege, at my whiteness, at my American passport, and the fact that the whole time, my children, that was their first question. They were like, why didn't you just leave? It was so hard. And I could, and I think that's another thing that sustained me. When I got pregnant with my first biological daughter, who's Ruby, she's 4 now, I wanted to have Ruby in Nepal at this rural hospital where I've seen plenty of people die. And I was like, no, I'm going to have Ruby in Nepal. And my husband looked at me and was like, you are coming back. You're getting on the plane. And at 8 months pregnant, I got on the plane and I came back, and I had our daughter in a beautiful state-of-the-art hospital. And she ended up in the NICU and needing every single intervention in the entire world, and all experts. And I've ended up needing so much birth assistance. And it's my privilege was so glaring, I'm pregnant and I have my little app, and I'm like, oh, my baby's the size of an apricot this week, and I get my prenatal screening, and I can see the little limbs, and I have neighbors, Nepali best friends who I've raised children with and see every day, who are going through a completely different reality. And it felt like a huge responsibility to write that and navigate that, and the fact that we can just get on an airplane and leave, and I am here now. So I don't know. I just think I've been doing a lot of work on caring for ourselves and self, so that I can keep doing this for a lifetime. And how do we do that? I don't know how we reconcile it. Right? Don't you ask every single day, why are we not there? How lucky are we? But it was a really hard thing to write about. And I did come back and forth all the time. So I would be in Nepal fighting a Maoist revolution, and the State Department would be issuing warnings saying to get out, and there was shooting on the streets, and I'd get out, I had to come back for a speaking event, and I'd drive down Main Street in Mendham and pick up a bagel with cream cheese. And then there were signs like, no Dunkin' Donuts. Like the biggest issue in Mendham was the fight. The biggest issue in Mendham was like, half of Mendham wanted a Dunkin' Donuts, and the other half was like, we don't want the Dunkin' Donuts, there's no chains allowed. It's gonna cause traffic on Main Street. And I had just come from war, like thousands of men being bussed in to fight some fight and evacuated. And so it's complicated that we live on a place where it's like being on a different planet, and yet we're all the same.
I was going to say, what touched me in the book is there's a village. Like you have a group of aunties and uncles who are there full time, and they're, you've got people in place to make sure things keep running while you're fundraising, and that's the piece that is like, it's really beautiful. Their ability to cook, their ability to chop 100 onions when you're chopping one, and I think that's like the key. And we talked a little bit earlier about colonialism versus cultural sensitivity, and just being able to navigate that and set up a community that's helping support the school and your family, and you can have the ability to come and help raise funds and go back. And it's not, there's a village. It takes a village, right?
Yeah. I had to ask, well, what am I good at? What can I bring to this community? Because I wanted the kids to look up and see Nepali people. There's a Nepali principal, Nepali leadership, aunties, uncles, healthcare workers, like you'll see in the book. There's so many people that can do that. What did I have to give? I had a ticket to Mendham, where I could babysit for $10 an hour and send that money back. I had access to people who I could share my story with and, raise resources. Actually, my husband read the book and he's like, you're missing out on what you do all the time. You have to sit and fundraise and write grant applications. And he was like, you're missing so much. And I was like, okay. And I tried to go back and write that in, because that is a lot of the job in the nonprofit world, is building resources to create impact and create change. So it's kind of like, and I advise this to young people all the time, look at what you have to give. And at that time, the only thing I had going for me was that I could babysit, and I had access, I was babysitting for a lot of CEOs who were like, let me help you write your business plan. Or, oh, have you thought about 501c3 status? So they'd come home and over a glass of wine from date night, and they would mentor me. And they'd be like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And then they'd give me extra tips because they knew I was sending back all the money to Nepal. And so luckily, again, the place that I came from and the culture for philanthropy here, the culture of charity and giving back, just we're among some of the talented, most educated population of people in the world, in Chatham and Mendham and Mountain Lakes and the Community Foundation of New Jersey, where our office is. So using New York City and using that, learning from it, and then bringing it back. So thanks for getting me there.
It hit me in the book, and I work in the nonprofit world. I write a lot of grants and deploy resources. So it's the piece that is behind the scenes that it's huge. It's the difference.
Yeah, but you can't write a whole book about sitting at your computer writing a grant.
It's not exciting. It is not exciting.
It is not. It's just boring. A lot of my day is really, really boring, and I'm sitting on Zoom, and it's just not exciting at all.
I think we were going to wrap up, and I want to again thank St. Paul's, thank everyone for coming.
Thank you, St. Paul's.
And there's merchandise from the Women's Cooperative for sale. There's the book for sale. Maggie's going to stay and sign it. I don't know, Ellen, did you want to say a couple of words?
Oh, sure. It's hard to follow this up.
Oprah.
How about a round of applause for our did an amazing job, really, very professional. It was wonderful. And I definitely want to thank Maggie for making us her first stop on her book tour.
Good first stop.
Good first
really
stop.
Good one.
Definitely.
Solid. Got the 2 weeks out of the
They're used to it. I cry during my sermons sometimes, so don't worry about it. But thank you all for coming and being a part of this, and we are just so grateful. You've reminded us again of how privileged we are and how safe we are, even though often sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And there's so much going on in the world, whether it's Nepal or Ukraine or wherever it happens to be, in Africa, different countries. Thank you for opening our eyes again, waking us up again, and making us look at the world differently and from a space where we can do something. We can make a difference. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for coming. And of course, we still have books and book signing available, and there's still coffee in the back. So thank you again for coming.